Hello. Today we will going to discuss about a new topic of psychology, the concept of self. It is a very important topic. The concept of self means it is related to our own self, to know about our own self. So the concept of self simply represents that who am I, why I have come to this world, what is the highest goal or purpose of my life. So there are a lot of things involved in the concept of self. There are different likings, dislikings, choice, interest, patterns, happiness, unhappiness, comfort, lot of things are there when we are discussing about concept of self. Our concept of self also related to our feelings, emotions, observations, experiences. So basically when I am saying who am I, it is our own self, our own observation of our own behavior can tell us many things about our own self. And sometimes we also compare ourselves with others in terms of different emotions, observations, different experiences. We have our name, our profession, my name, my profession, roles, titles, labels, positions, all these things comes under the concept of self. The self can be classified under three categories: the real self, the original self, the possible self, or the ideal self. Now the real self means the original self. This means this is the self in our original form, and it can be easily affected by external pressure. It can be experienced at a subtle level. Now the second one is that of possible self. It can be defined as one's own conceptions of what type of person he or she is going to become in his life, our goal, our future expectations, or something like that. So there are three major factors that usually influence our possible self, and they are our past experiences, our present behavior and interactions with others, and finally our future expectations. So here we have taken the 5 koshas which represents the concept of self, that is Annamaya kosha, Pranamaya kosha, Manomaya kosha, Vijnanamaya kosha and Anandamaya kosha. Now all these koshas are very important, or in other words we can say this as layers to the self. Now Annamaya kosha is the physical body getting energy from food. Whatever the food that we eat, we are getting energy. That is Annamaya kosha. Annamaya kosha plays a very important role because whatever we eat, that is related to our body. Second is Pranamaya kosha, the existence of cell as the prana or having life. That is Pranamaya kosha. Prana is life, the existence of self. Third is Manomaya kosha. Now Manomaya kosha, it involves the sense organs, the mind, ahankar, etc. Ego. The ego simply represents our own self. It is not related to somebody who is egocentric or something like that. Manomaya kosha related to our mind. Vijnanamaya kosha, it is related to the concept of ideas, concepts, construct that helps in understanding the world. Then Anandamaya kosha. Now Anandamaya kosha, this is the innermost layer which reflects the real self, what we are actually. That is Anandamaya kosha. That is what, or these are called Pancha koshas, which are very important. The concept of self also represents different characteristics, and there are other things which we would like to discuss, and that is about different concepts which are related to the concept of self. First one is the self-identity. Self-identity is one's own definition of oneself. It also means evaluation of our own self. It includes one's qualities, gender, social status. And second is self-concept. Self-concept is multifaceted construct. It is the central element of one's own self. It is also one of the most important component of our social identity. And that is what self-concept is all about. It can be defined as an organized collection of beliefs about self. Our self-concept is acquired primarily through our family and social interaction. How we are interacting in the society, how we are building relationships, how we communicate with each other. All these things comes under the self-concept. Third one is self-esteem. Now self-esteem is relatively stable aspect of our own self. It can be defined as one's overall assessment of one's worth or value as a person. So it is one of the key components of one's personality trait, which is considerably influenced by our early childhood experiences. Our success and failure in life is greatly influenced by our own self-esteem. However, low self-esteem has been found to be a very common problem among people of all age groups today. And at the fourth part is self-perception. Now, what does self-perception means? How we perceive our own self, whether I have a positive or a negative view of myself, what I think about my own self. It also reflects to our own interpretations of our own selves. That is what self-perception is all about. Self-perception. Many processes are involved in it. Our own perception of our own self, starting from our physical body to personality characteristics, our potentials, maturity levels, stability, etc. all can be included under self-perception. Next is self-evaluation. Now, self-evaluation refers to one's evaluation of one's own self, how I value myself. It helps us to know and understand where we stand at any given time. Self-evaluation helps us to assess our own performance at different times and situations and gives us scope to change ourselves to cope with the demand of the situation, what we learn from the environment, external environment, and how we deal with that. Next is self-presentations. Now, self-presentation refers to how we present ourselves in different contexts, because many a times we present ourselves in a way which we actually are not. Sometimes we represent ourselves in a different way. Now, this factor necessitates us to find out the difference between our actual self and the self that we present before others. We may call it as a public self. So we are more conscious of our public image rather than our real self. And it is also a fact that we exhibit multiple public selves. Next is self-focusing. Now, self-focusing is a cognitive activity. It can be defined as the extent to which our attention can be directed towards oneself. To make it more simple, self-focusing refers to whether I am focusing more on my inner self or to that of the aspects of the external world. So that is about self-focusing. So the extent to which our attention can be directed towards oneself. Next is self-monitoring. Self-monitoring can be defined as a personality disposition that ranges from the tendency to regulate one's behavior depending on the need or the demand. So what exactly are the need, what are the demands that we will going to fulfill, and any sort of pressure of the situations up to the tendency to regulate one's behavior on the basis of internal factors or conditions at any given time. So this is basically self-monitoring practically influence many aspects of our interpersonal relationships and our behavior. Next, we will going to discuss about self-discrepancy. Now, self-discrepancy can be defined as the gap that exists between our real self and our ideal self. Hence, the gap between what we actually are and what we would like to become is called self-discrepancy. Though most of us experience self-discrepancy as many phases of life, still then, somehow or other we manage to overcome its negative effects either by changing our behavior or our thought process. So what is most important is to be aware of the frequency of its occurrence and the resulting impact it is creating on us. Next is self-awareness. Now this is very important. Self-awareness refers to the state of consciousness in which we focus our attention inward, open ourselves. Large individual differences exist in relation to the tendency of the self-aware or self-awareness. So in general, we are more aware of our own selves under three different situations, like when standing before the mirror or performing in front of an audience or taking our photographs. So in these three particular situations, we all are aware to a heightened degree. The effect to the degree of awareness has both positive and negative effects upon our performance and behavior. Next is self-attribution. Self-attribution refers to the process by which we draw inferences about the causes of our own behavior. This process helps us to analyze the meaning of our own experiences. That what we experience, the personal factors or the factors within the person, and the other one is the environmental factors, the factors lying in the external environment. Because internal and external environment both plays a very important role when it comes to self. Next comes self-understanding. Now, what is self-understanding? Self-understanding is very important from the point of view of setting realistic goals in life, behaving appropriately with others, and taking interest to create good impression and influence on others. So in order to achieve this, we need accurate information about our own self, starting from our physical appearance to our abilities, qualities, our self-image and personality characteristics, all these things. Sometimes we create our own false image and are satisfied with it and are reluctant to change ourselves, and this will definitely inhibit the process of our growth. And that is what self-understanding is all about. How much do we know about our own self? Next is self-enhancement. Now, self-enhancement is a very powerful motive that helps in understanding our own self. How much we are interested to know about our own self. So, in other words, it is a tendency to maintain good and positive feelings about our own self. Or in general, people have a tendency to improve themselves. But many people are there who do not want to grow in their life, and that itself is a reality. So many of us have the desire to enhance ourselves by connecting ourselves with successful persons and celebrities. But this will not serve the purpose provided by draw inspirations from them and use them in our life. Next is self-regulation. Self-regulations can be defined as a tendency on the part of an individual to direct and control his own behavior, desires, impulses, instincts. Because under normal conditions, individuals usually resist their desires and impulses that stand as an obstacle in their path to progress. So self-regulations plays a very important role. Next, self-efficacy. Now, what is self-efficacy? Self-efficacy can be defined as a strong conviction among people that can definitely achieve their desired goals or targets. They have both faith and belief in them, and that can excellently perform the task that they have been entrusted with. That is what self-efficacy is all about. It is considered to be one of the most important components in one's personality that not only helps in making appropriate personal adjustment but also in achieving success in professional and other fields also. Self-defeating or self-schema that we can say. So self-schema is a different word that we are using here, and that is related to the self. Self-schema is the sum total of everything that a person knows about himself and imagined about himself or herself. The self-schema exercises a very powerful control in regulating one's own behavior and also helps us in processing only those informations that are relevant to our own self rather than focusing on other irrelevant informations. Self-defeating. Self-defeating behavior can be defined as those action patterns that is against an individual's self-interest and which are performed sometimes intentionally and at some other time unknowingly. And that is what self-defeating is all about. And at times there may be a deliberate intention to destroy oneself, while at other time the behavior results as a result of self-defensive measure. And that is what self-defeating is all about. Next we will going to discuss about self-disclosure. Now, after self-defeating, self-disclosure also plays a very important role. Now, self-disclosure is another important aspect of self in which the person concerned has no inhibition in expressing or disclosing everything about him or her. There are certain sort of extrovert personality or extrovert person, they always try to speak about themselves a lot, however personal, unpleasant and negative it may be. So they do not bother as to what impression other people will carry of him. The reverse of it also observed, where people are very much reluctant to speak about themselves, and that is what self-disclosure is all about. Next is self-realization. Self-realization, that is very common, and self-realization means understanding the self in its totality, in connection with the real purpose, value and goal of human life. Self-realization is to know the totality of changes that take place within the self. It is a relatively higher state of human life. By exploring our own self, we can come to this state, and that is what self-realization is all about. And at last, self-control, or in other words we can say self-discipline, is the key to attain realization of one's own self. It can be achieved by adhering to a disciplined lifestyle. Self-control refers to holding in check of the instinctive urges that try to drag the individual away from the experience of the real truth of life. And this can be possible through regular practice, such as yoga or meditation helps us to attain self-control to the highest. So this is what self is all about. Thank you.